sight. So jump in bed and cover your head, 'cause Santa Claus comes tonight. Here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane. Vixen and Blitzen and all his reindeer pulling on the reins. Bells are ringing, children singing, all is merry and bright. So hang your stockings and say your prayers, 'cause Santa Claus comes tonight. Here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane. He's got a bag that's filled with toys for boys and girls again. Hear those sleigh bells jingle, jangle, oh, what a beautiful sight. So jump in bed and cover your head, 'cause Santa Claus comes tonight.
Hey everybody, it's the top of the hour. That means very little, except that it's 3 minutes until the show. So, grab yourself, snack, something tasty, a drink, something tasty, a blanket, something cozy, I don't know. Share out the link with your friends and family that aren't already in the stream. 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk will begin in about 2.5 minutes. Welcome to the Virtual Stab Comedy Theater. It's time for 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk. Please welcome to your screen, 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk.
Hey folks, welcome to the show. This is 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk. I'm Corey Behringer. And if I may quote the great band Nickelback, look at this photograph. Every time I do, it makes me think of my co-host, Court Hansen. How you doing, Court?
I'm hurt by that. Yeah, I'm hurt by
But
that.
are you at least happy I didn't growl the lyrics? I feel like I could have easily just like,
people-
I didn't do that.
People-
I spared you that.
People are a fan of doing that as like a bit.
Yeah.
And as
Yeah.
someone who used to do a lot of very, very similar bits, I get it.
Mhm.
But I stopped, so they can stop with that too.
They didn't get the memo that Court
Yeah, there's-
stopped, so the rest of the world has to stop having fun too.
There's always new butt rock songs to do that
Yeah.
with. It doesn't have to stay
That's true.
Nickelback.
That's true. I think there's just something about like that line in particular. It is just so like blunt, and it's just
Yeah, very
so
forceful.
yeah. And just look at it. But there was a reason that I brought up that brilliant quote, and that's because we're taking a bit of a turn off the beaten path for 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk this week. Typically, we talk about the literal sounds of music, but this week we're all about music of the eyes. We're talking about photography this week. What's your? Because I have a somewhat maybe not necessarily controversial, but maybe in this episode a little controversial. I've never been a huge photography guy as far as fine art photography. What's your general take on photography? Notwithstanding, like, rock photography, just photography in general.
My mom is a photographer. She's still
Oh, okay.
a photographer and still alive,
Yeah.
so is. So photography was a pretty big part of growing up. It was lots of cameras around. So I took a lot of photos in high school, both of like live music and also the more attempting to do fine art photography. I was really, really bad at old school film photography. I could not get my prints to come out looking like anything other than a white rectangle or a black rectangle. But it's always been around. So I guess you could say that I'm familiar with the concept.
Yeah. That's more of an actual background than I have with it, because I have just a somewhat jaded perspective of a lot of fine art photography. Didn't quite move me, but I was very much moved by like when you can like capture something in the moment, and it doesn't have the same sort of necessarily intentions going into it of like, I am making a conscious effort to make a piece of art. Like, it just happens.
Yeah.
That's magic to me. I love that.
I think that does make sense. Like photography, I think is coolest when it's capturing a specific place and time and person or event. But that's. I feel like there's no way to end this intro conversation without it sounding like we don't like photography.
I realized that as I said the very first thing, and that's the problem when you don't prepare for a show properly, which I didn't. And that's when you rely on your instincts of just like, I'm just going to talk about what's on my mind. Sometimes what's on your mind might make your guest feel like they're unwelcome, and that is not the intention. What we want to do is create a warm atmosphere where all disciplines of art are accepted, and photography should not be excluded. And that brings us to our guest this week. He is a brilliant photographer of everything from live music performance and candids that we're talking about of literal legends. If you look at this man's dossier, it will astound you, as it has just astounded me mere moments before we started the show. Again, did not prepare. We're joined this week by Jake Blakesberg. How you doing, Jake?
I am doing just fine. Thank you so much for having me on the show. When I first started communicating with Court and I saw the name of the show, I thought I was going to be talking to a bunch of 55-year-old guys like me, you know. And
Yeah, that's
That's the ruse we intended.
I saw Ford, I'm like, where's your dad, dude? Like, where's your dad? I thought I was talking to your dad. So
Our feeling is that dad rock is not so much a strict age, requirement, but more so a general vibe of that which might be seen as the less cool or formally cool. And by the younger generation, perhaps isn't anymore. Stuff like the Dead or Steely Dan, like these older things. Older. It's all perspective.
That we think are cool. That we're trying to
we
convince.
think are very cool.
We're trying to convince our peers are also very cool.
Yeah. Yes.
well,
And
what's your favorite groovy music of the moment that you're digging that's like at least 30 years old?
Oh, for me, that it's an easy answer. I recently got extremely into the Tragically Hip, so that's kind of been on a constant rotation for me, as well as going back farther. In the last several months, I became very, very enamored with the songwriter Judy Sill from the mid '70s. Tragic story, but a beautiful one nonetheless. And so I've been really enjoying her work, as small of a catalog as that is. How about you, Court? What's been the recent stuff for you?
I've been listening to a lot of live shows, live Rick Danko shows from the band. There's quite a few recordings that are like his solo shows, or it's him with Paul Butterfield or Richard Manuel. And I've been listening to those a lot lately because it's cool to hear a lot of those songs without the band. And hear just kind of a different take on them. A lot more raucous of an energy.
Oh, really?
And so, been listening to those a lot.
Nice.
I need to look into that. Yeah. Well, like I was saying at the top, this is going to be a bit of a different show for us because, we don't have necessarily a recording artist with us. We have a brilliant photographer. So what Jay has provided are some batches of photographs. Whereas normally we kind of do a random thing on this show. We sort of let Jesse call the shots back at the Stab Comedy Theater. This one is a little more actually organized, which I'm also looking forward to. So we're going to be seeing some photographs and talking about them kind of as they come along. I think that's pretty much all you folks at home need to know. So Jesse, if you wouldn't mind, let's hear this. Let's see this first batch of photos. And these are some blues collections, I believe.
Yeah, these are blues artists. So we decided to start with the blues. And
Love it.
so I guess I'm going to just sort of narrate what these photos are. And this was a really cool shoot that I did in Oakland back in '98. And that's B.B. King and Tracy Chapman in the middle there. And they were making a video for a song they recorded, which is The Thrill Is Gone, which is a very famous B.B. King song, but a newer version of it, late '90s. And this is a mock wedding going on that was supposedly taking place in the 1940s. And so I did production stills for the day, hanging out with BB and Tracy and all these actors that were dressed up in killer clothes from the 1940s. Super fun, super cool. One of those unique situations, back in the days of quote unquote MTV, really, they were still making music videos.
Yeah, when things still had a big budget.
Yeah, the next photograph is a really important photograph for me. And this is because these are, in my opinion, some of the most important blues artists that I've ever photographed, and really important blues artists in general. But left to right, you got B.B. King, James Cotton, Muddy Waters, and Johnny Winters. And I photographed this in June of 1979, about 3 weeks after I graduated from high school. So I was 17 years old. And these guys are legendary blues artists. And I don't know, about 7 or 8 years ago, Johnny Winter put out a box set, and they used this photo in the box set. So it's interesting how something that I took when I was 17 years old, 40 years ago, is relevant and important today enough to be certainly in a CD package. And the next photo is from the same show. It's June 29th, 79, which is Muddy Waters. And we were huge blues nuts in high school and blues fans, and we loved Muddy. So, I was thrilled to be able to get pictures of Muddy Waters. The next shot is the legendary B.B. King. And this was shot in 1994, September 25th. And it looks like it was shot in a photo studio, which essentially it was. But that photo studio was actually on the basketball court backstage at Shoreline Amphitheater in Mountain View, where I built a studio with a backdrop and lighting. And right before he went on stage, he came and sat down for me. And, we did this quick little 15-minute photo shoot for the cover of Guitar Player magazine. And the next photo is B.B. King again. Love this shot. Similar situation. This time is December 28th, 2006. And this was shot backstage at the Paramount Theater in Oakland, California. And it was for a cover story for a magazine called the Fretboard Journal. And this particular photograph, like BB wanted me to shoot it on his tour bus. And, it's like, there's like this much room. And I'm like, dude, not going to work. I'm like, I took some pictures of him in his little lair in the back of the bus, but I said, I'm going to set something up inside the green room right next to the backstage door where you come on and off stage. And he said, great, I'll do it after the show as I'm walking off the stage, which always makes me nervous because if I miss him, he gets on the bus and they drive away. So he walks off the stage and he's being helped by somebody. And I look at him and I go, BB, photo shoot. He looks at me and goes, oh yeah, they don't want to do this. Guys like this, they've been doing this their whole lives. So I walked him into the room, which was just 5, 6, 10 feet away from where he was, and sat him down. And he looked at me and goes, you have 10 minutes. And I just shot for 10 minutes. And this is shot on film with my Hasselblad, which is a square format, medium format camera. And, you're shooting and you crank your film, there's 12 shots on a roll of film. And I just love this shot of him. I'm just trying to make him laugh. And that's an old movie projector behind him, an old telephone. I thought it was a good sort of background. And the next shot is the legendary Charlie Musselwhite, one of the most well-known harmonica players in the blues world. Recently he's worked with Ben Harper, but he's worked with everybody. I mean, I think he was on an In Excess record from, back in the day when they were still making records and he was still alive. This next photo is a really interesting photograph. It was taken on January 6th, 1992. And it was at the original Sweetwater Music Hall, which is in Mill Valley, California. And the Sweetwater was this little tiny room that held about 80 people. And which is amazing because look at the talent in this photograph. In the front row, left to right, we have Albert Collins, Bonnie Raitt, John Lee Hooker, and Robert Cray. And the back row on left to right is Johnny Johnson, Roy Rogers, John Hammond Jr., and Charlie Musselwhite. So Johnny Johnson, the guy on the left in the back, he was Chuck Berry's keyboard player. Albert Collins was a legendary blues guitar player. Those are the only two people, and John Lee Hooker are the only people in this photograph that are no longer alive. But I saw Jerry Garcia play on this stage at the Sweetwater, and Bob Weir and Phil Lesh. I mean, it was one of those remarkable little rooms that held 80 people, and magic happened in there. And then this next photo is a portrait that I did of John Lee Hooker down at his house in Redwood City in March of '92 for a Guitar World magazine. And, I did many, many, many portraits of Hooker. And after the first couple of photo shoots I did with him, he always insisted on wearing these big, giant black sunglasses because he said that the strobe lights bothered his eyes. And that was kind of a drag because I didn't really love doing it. So if you put Ray-Bans on, it was a little bit cooler. But here you can see his eyes and his hands and it's just got this incredible soul. And again, that's just me setting up a backdrop in his living room, I believe, and clearing some furniture and just doing these portraits of him. After he actually sat on his little amp in the little sunroom and played for me for 45 minutes while I photographed his hands going up and down the fretboard, because the story was to photograph the different hand positions of some of his most legendary songs. And then I did the portraits as well. The next photo is another one of John Lee Hooker and Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones. And Keith was recording with John on one of John's records. And this was at a recording studio here in San Francisco called Russian Hill Recorders. And I think they gave me about 5 minutes to get this photograph, but I just love it with the smoke coming up. And they just pretty much ignored me while I was shooting them. And they talked about, what they were going to do the next day when Keith came down to John's house, what kind of whiskey they were going to drink, and, what kind of women were going to be hanging out and that kind of stuff. The next photograph is Johnny Winter, which was taken on June 22nd, 1979, 2 weeks after graduating from high school, or about 11 days after graduating from high school. And I think he was touring as well as, to get ready to do that show at Radio City Music Hall with B.B. King and Muddy Waters that we showed you earlier. And what's interesting about this photograph is that this is this weird nightclub called Alexander's, and it was down the turnpike in sort of South Jersey. And I was underage, but they let me into this bar to photograph it. Somehow I met the owner, and he's like, yeah, sure, you can come in the back door and take photographs. But I found out years later that this venue during the day was a strip club, and at night it was a rock and roll place. I also photographed Lowell George from Little Feat 2 or 3 nights before he died in the same club. Next photo is Buddy Guy backstage at the Blues Festival, San Francisco Blues Festival here in San Francisco back in September of 2004. And then I got one more John Lee Hooker photo at the end here that I just love the shot because I love the socks that he's wearing. And again, this is a studio that I set up in his garage. And I'd done the shot that we looked at previously, just like 3 weeks before, 2-3 weeks before this shot. So I needed to do something a little bit different. It was for a different magazine, shot it on a white background. And this photograph is actually done with a 4x5 camera. That's a big camera on a tripod where you put the cloth over your head. Mm-hmm. You got to focus with a little loop on the ground glass. And it's actually shot on a film that's a Polaroid film, which is why it's got those kind of funky edges around it. It was a Polaroid film that gave you a negative also. So that's my collection of blues photos that I came up with, you guys. 10 greats from the blues. What do you think about that?
Man.
Spectacular. Well, I would be remiss not to just kind of go right into the blues here, kind of have a quick blues chat, because what you said really resonated with me about how, this was high school for you, that it was some of those shots, practically, and how much you were into the blues in high school. Like, what is it about being in high school and feeling the blues? Like there's just something so powerful and profound about that. That was my story for sure. Like, that was high school for me. What was your entry point for the blues, Jay?
Well, I think it was a couple of things. I think that it was raw, it was raunchy, it dripped sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I went to high school in the 1970s, and we didn't have the internet to teach us how to live our lives. We had to figure it out on our own. So all we had were our older brothers and sisters and their friends and our friends, and trying to discover music. The blues, some of these guys like Muddy Waters and B.B. King and John Lee Hooker, these are people that people like Clapton looked up to. So, we probably read about how the Stones, were blues nuts when they were coming up in the 60s, early 60s. Clapton.
Yeah, those first 5 Stones albums are half blues covers, if not all blues covers.
And stuff like that. So the Allman Brothers. So the music we were listening to were covers of blues legend songs. It just really turned us on. It really made us music fans. And we were we'd go to concerts and we'd pump our fists and take pictures for me and drink too much alcohol and smoke too much weed and only hope that we could get laid, but never did. And that's what fucking the blues was saying to us,
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of a similar question is, how did you get into photography as I guess I imagine it started as a hobby before it became a profession. What led to that?
I borrowed my brother's camera and my dad's camera, and I started taking it to concerts because I wanted to kind of create my own memorabilia. And so if you look at pictures of my bedroom from the 1970s, there's just a lot of 8x10 black and white glossies thumbtacked to my bedroom wall that I developed in the darkroom in my mother's basement that I built. And my senior year in high school, they built a darkroom in my high school in one of the classrooms. And I was the very, very first student to ever make a print in that darkroom. And here I am, 40 plus years later, and I'm still doing it. So, it was magic. You put that blank white piece of paper in the primordial ooze of the darkroom chemistry, and all of a sudden, B.B. King's face would come up out of it, or Neil Young or Bob Dylan, whoever I photographed, and it was a turn on. It was like, holy fuck, man, this is fucking cool. And then you'd give those prints to your friends or sell them to them for $1 or $2, so you could buy drug, have drug money, so these photographs would end up on your wall and your friend's wall. And I hate to say it, but we invented social media by sharing those photos.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah,
we didn't know what it was, but you go to all my friends' house and they all had my pictures hanging up in their bedrooms. So that was sort of how that all happened. But yeah, I started out as for fun and a hobby, and despite my own insecurities and ineptitude, I turned it into a career that I've been able to support myself and my lifestyle for decades now.
Was it tough to? Was it tough to get into taking pictures in places that are as dark as concert venues and bars and nightclubs?
Very practical question.
Because as someone who's tried to take so many blurry, not very good photos at a lot of punk shows in high school, that was the hill that I couldn't climb, was taking pictures in a dark setting. Was that something that you just figured out fairly quickly, or?
Yeah, back then you didn't have a digital camera and you couldn't look at what you were taking a picture of. You had actually had to have different types of technical skills. Nowadays you have computer technical skills. Back then you actually needed to understand how film and light and lenses and aperture and shutter speed and darkroom chemistry all work together to give you a negative that was good enough to print, right? As you were saying earlier, I think before we went live, that all the pictures you took were either all white or all black. So
yeah,
you weren't doing the right drugs. But what were your big favorite punk bands in high school? What were you listening to?
It was a lot of. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and so it was a lot of shows, just local bands.
But Fugazi from DC, did they go see them, or?
Fugazi was before my time, unfortunately.
Right.
But just lots of not very good hardcore bands, honestly.
Do you know who Me First and the Gimme Gimmes are?
Oh yeah. I was just thinking about them today, actually.
I shot 6 of those album covers.
Oh, did
hell
you?
Yeah.
They have great album covers.
Yeah, I shot most of those, all the way up to the one with the Kill Johnny's Bar Mitzvah. I didn't shoot that one. I shot all the ones before that, and then I shot one after that, or maybe 2 after that. But yeah, Fat Mike used to live down the street from me.
Oh.
He lives in LA now. But yeah, so I shot a bunch of, the band Lagwagon?
Yep.
I shot the cover of Blaze for that record. Or the CD package, rather. I think there's a horse on the cover, but I shot one NoFX record. Yeah. So,
wow, man.
I'm cool, man. I'm not. I'm fucking cool. I'm as cool as you.
All right, let's see another chunk of these photos.
All right, I think we're gonna move into Neil Young.
Nice.
One of my favorite people to photograph. And this first photo that Jesse's working on bringing up here is from January of 2000. And this is shot up in Salt Lake City, Utah. And it was the very first show of the tour. That was the Y2K tour. Boy, that was 20 years ago. So you guys were in diapers still.
Not quite, but close enough.
Yeah.
But by choice.
Right. And so they flew me in to shoot the opening of the tour. And this is fucking hardcore rock and roll, man. This is Neil Young, just, raging it up and everything, and just, crushing it. Neil is one of those guys, because a lot of people that I photograph have been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years, and they've been photographed so much they are way, way, way over the photo shoot. But my job is to go out and make a good photograph, because otherwise, why is somebody going to hire me to do another photograph, right? So even though I have all these reluctant subjects, I got to really step up. So if you look at this next photo here, this was part of a shoot that I did for Musician Magazine, and I had exactly 10 minutes to do this shoot. And As a matter of fact, you remember Kurt Loder from MTV?
Uh-huh.
Was that before your time? He was doing an interview with Neil at this place where I did this shoot. And after he was done with the interview, I had to do my shoot. And I took a test Polaroid, right? This is pre-digital. So I did a test Polaroid, and it takes 90 seconds for development. And while it was developing, Kurt Loder came back over and started talking to Neil. Well, when the photo shoot started, the publicist looked at me and said, okay, you have 10 minutes, go, and hit the stopwatch, went into the restaurant, came out 10 minutes later and said, you're done. I said, I haven't taken one photo yet. He's been talking to Kurt Loder the whole time. And he looks at Kurt Loder and he says, Kurt, get the fuck out of here. Jay, you have 10 minutes, go. So I actually did 3 setups in 10 minutes. This was the last setup. And the reason why this is sort of a blown out photograph is because it was intentionally shot on a film that was called Polograph, which was a high contrast black and white film, not made to photograph people, not made to photograph things. It was made to photograph black and white text on white paper. And so that's why all the whites are completely blown out and the blacks are completely have no detail on the shadow. And so the roll of film, each roll of film only had 12 exposures on it. And you had to bracket your exposure by just a third of a stop each time, because the exposure latitude was so minimal that literally if you were off by the tiniest bit, the whole roll would be ruined. So you would do a little bit underexposed, a little bit right on the money, a little bit, you'd shoot 4 frames, 4 frames, and 4 frames, and you'd sort of bracket it and hope you'd end up with 1 or 2 shots that were exposed properly, because it was not a perfect science, let's just say. But so this was the last setup of these 3 setups. Go to the next shot, Jesse. This was the first shot that I did in that session. Basically had him sit down, get his hair tied back in a ponytail. I wanted him to take it out, but it's like, you don't say, hey, Neil, your hair's looking a little messy. Can you take the ponytail back? Like that shit don't fly with Neil Young. So I did those 2 shots, and there was one other shot, I guess, against a tree. That's a cool little shot that I didn't include in here because we wanted to keep it to 10. But that was the shoot. This was June 12th, 1995. The next photograph was taken on September 28th, 1978. It was the beginning of my senior year in high school. I had just started high school senior year 2 weeks earlier. And this was Neil Young at Madison Square Garden. And I think I shot 2 rolls of film, and this is the only photo that was in focus and well exposed.
Was this the Live Rust tour?
Live Rust, that's what this is. Live Rust, baby. Next photo brings us a little bit more contemporary. This is Dave Matthews and Neil Young rocking it out, probably during like an All Along the Watchtower. And this is down at the Bridge School Benefit down in Mountain View at Shoreline Amphitheater, October 21, 2001. Of course, this year we didn't have a Bridge School. They've been on hiatus for a few years. Maybe it'll come back someday. We don't know. But, this was, I shot 27 out of the 30 years of the Bridge School Benefit. So, I like working with artists over and over again. So with Neil Young, I got to work with him at least once a year for 27 years in a row, but typically would shoot Neil at other times during the year. The next photo is another shot, one of my favorite shots from the Bridge School. And this is Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam and Neil Young during the finale, which I think was Rockin' in the Free World. And this ran as a full page photo, as the first photo in Rolling Stone magazine. I shot the Bridge School Benefit for Rolling Stone magazine for about 25 years in a row on assignment for them. But I love this photograph. There's just so much power and just the framing with the tambourine next to the Bridge School sign. It's just like one of those, rarely perfect photos in my opinion. So the next photograph is a portrait that I did of Neil because he was flying to Brazil to do some sort of technology thing with his Pono sound system, and Neil needed a visa photo. Now, Neil is not the kind of guy that can walk into Walgreens to get a visa photo, so they asked me to do his visa photo for him. So you're not allowed to wear a hat or glasses, so he didn't shave. He looked scraggly, classic Neil. He sits down. He gave me 30 seconds to get the visa portrait, which I did, and then I said, let me get one more with you with the hat on. He put the hat on, and he looked at me, and I got one frame, and this is it, and that's the shot.
That's great.
Love this next shot of Neil at the Bridge School Benefit in 2011. This is me up on the stage in the back on the platform where the kids are, and just with the spotlight and the long shadow, just like a really cool shot. Another bridge school shot. This one is from 2015. And this was a portrait that I did of Neil. I asked him if I could do a portrait of him next to his Link Volt car. And he said, sure. And then he disappeared on me for 20 minutes and went and sat in the sun. And I kept an eye on him from a distance. And then he finally started to get up, and I went and grabbed him. That flower that he's holding, I handed it to him when he was sitting in the sun. Didn't say a word to him. I walked up to him, plucked the flower off the little plant next to him, handed it to him, and just walked away. And then he held on to it for the next 15, 20 minutes. He stood up. I said, do you want to do this photograph? And he said, yeah. He walked around the tour bus, stood there for about 1 minute, took about 30 pictures, and I said, I'm done. And he walked away. And that was it. And then I believe this is the last one of Neil, another portrait that I did of him in 1991. This was taken on October 30th, about a week after Bill Graham was killed in a horrible helicopter accident. And this was for the cover of Tower Pulse magazine, which used to be the magazine for Tower Records. It was their in-house magazine. And I went down to Neil's ranch in Woodside. And again, I had 10 minutes with him indoors for the first setup. And then we went outside, and he let me shoot him for about 3 more minutes sitting on this stack of firewood. And then that was it. And I was done. But Neil is one of my favorite artists. And I feel very, very fortunate that not only have I photographed him, 40 or 50 different times, I've been able to do portraits of him 6, 7, 8 different times. So it's not just live stuff or on stage or candid off stage. They're actually, formal portrait sessions that I've been able to do with him, whether they're 1 minute long or 20 minutes long. I've been able to get him and direct him and get his attention and his gaze into my camera to kind of create that look. So,
oh, that's brilliant. So a question that occurred to me when I was looking at some of those live shots, though, is something I've actually thought about before, but never actually asked a proper photographer about it. And that is, how do you manage to balance your focus as a professional doing a job and then also a fan of the music enjoying the show? Because to me, I feel like I have a hard time doing one or the other, and not sacrificing one for the other. Does that make sense?
It is a sacrifice. And so I hear the music in a different way. I experience the music in a different way. One of the reasons that I started shooting, like I said, was to create memorabilia to put on my bedroom wall. But another reason that I was taking pictures is because typically if you're at a concert and you're allowed to take pictures, you're not in the front row, you're in front of the front row.
Yeah.
Right. So you get to be as close as you possibly can to these legendary people, Tom Petty, Neil Young, the Grateful Dead, whoever it is. And so I like that spot. I like that feeling. I like that rush. I like that buzz, right? I don't smoke pot. I don't drink alcohol. I don't do drugs, right? I don't snort cocaine. I did that all when I was younger, but I don't do that shit anymore. And so this was this was an adrenaline rush. This was a dopamine feed, This was mainlining that shit. And so now when I go to see live music and I can't take photos, all I see is photos that I'm missing, right? Yeah. So, you do this for 45 years or whatever, 43 years, it's sort of ingrained in your brain, and it's hard to separate the two and just go to a show. So I go to shows and bring my camera almost always. It's rare that I don't.
What was the first show that you were able to go up to the front like that to what is that even called? The press section, photographer section?
The photo pit. The
photo pit. Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Well, oddly enough, I didn't really start getting credentialed to go see shows until the mid to late 80s here in San Francisco when I moved out here, and I was younger than you are. And was like, I got to figure out how to make a career and make a living, because I don't want to go and start an internet show in 40 years, when the internet gets invented in 20 more. And during a pandemic, I want to have real life skills that I can actually make a living. And I knew I didn't want to flip hamburgers because I was a vegetarian. So I started to figure out how to get assignments from magazines to go photograph it. But on May 6th, 1979, when I was 17 years old, I was hitchhiking from Virginia to New Jersey with a couple of stops to see the stop to see the Grateful Dead, and we were hitchhiking because the drunk guy that I drove down with totaled his van in the parking lot after a Dead show in Virginia 2 nights earlier on May 4th. And so I ended up in Washington, D.C. at a giant no nukes rally with 65,000 people protesting nuclear power. And I saw these photographers on the side of the stage, on the other side of the barricade, on the other side of the barrier, which was just like a little wooden mesh garden fence, like anybody could have walked over it. Yeah. But there's 15 photographers over on the side of the stage, and they all got their cameras and their press passage, and they're from Time and Newsweek and the AP and UPI and this newspaper and the Washington Post. And I'm like, I want to be there with those cool photographers. And then all of a sudden I look on the ground, and there it was, a press pass.
No way.
I put it on my chest, and I walked backstage, and while I was taking pictures, Jane Fonda, the legendary actress and activist, was up on the stage talking about how nuclear power was bad. And I was far back in the audience, and I have a picture of her, and she's this big. And then all of a sudden I was on stage with Jane Fonda taking a picture of her with my new press pass. And I was fucking cool. And I thought I was like that Time magazine photographer. And I was taking pictures of them. And all of a sudden Jackson Browne and Joni Mitchell and Graham Nash got up on stage and started talking and playing music. And I got pictures of them. And I was 17 years old, and I was on stage with these people, and I became one of them. And once I tasted that power, I never wanted to let it go.
Yeah.
How could you? I mean, really? Oh, that's brilliant.
Actually, there was a story when I was in college at the Evergreen State College, and me and Court were talking about that. He went there for a year before he dropped out and became a drug addict on the streets of Sacramento. When I was in college there, I worked for a photographer, and he got hired to photograph an Olympic marathon trial. Right, this is the marathon race where they determine who goes to the Olympics. So the top 3 winners go to the Olympics. And this was also very special because it was the women's trial. And not only was it special because it was going to be the first time ever in the history of the Olympics that the women got to compete in a marathon. So I got my boss that I worked for, I had an internship. He was a photographer, got hired to cover this race. And so I was his second shooter because I worked for him. And at the end of the race, I was at the stage where they were going to give the medals to the 3 women that they were going to then go on to compete in the Olympics. Joni Benoit was her name, the winner, and she was a very famous marathon runner back in the 80s. And I think she won in the Olympics as well. I can't remember. Anyway, I digress. I'm standing there, and right next to me is this big heavyweight photographer with 10 cameras around his neck. And I'm standing next to him with my one little Yashica camera that, my dad bought me for my 17th birthday. And I asked him who he's shooting for, and he says, Sports Illustrated. And all of a sudden, the 3 girls get up on the stage to get their medals, right? And the governor of the state of Washington is on the stage with them. And this photographer from Sports Illustrated yells to the governor. He says, Governor, get out of my picture. You're ruining it. And I looked at this guy, and I was like, this guy just told the governor of the state of Washington to get the fuck out of his picture because he's ruining his photograph for Sports Illustrated. And it was at that moment I knew that I wanted to be a magazine photographer.
That's great. I love that there's that kind of recurring theme of power. You were hungry for the power. you were drunk with it. That's amazing.
Yes.
Well, let's see another bunch of. Let's get into the next set.
Now let's move into the Grateful Dead. I did a little theme here with the Grateful Dead. I only chose photographs that I took in December of whatever year I took them in, because it's December.
Yeah.
Because I have thousands of photographs of the Grateful Dead, and so I just figured, what the fuck, right? All right, This first one. What do you think is going on here, boys?
Is that the closing of Winterland?
No, but close. It is New Year's Eve.
That's what I was going to guess. Yeah, it was just New Year's Eve. Yeah.
New Year's Eve, 1979. I took a Greyhound bus from New Jersey to California because I didn't know there were airlines. and I saw the Grateful Dead, and I waited online for 45 minutes or an hour before they opened the doors, and ran up front and leaned on the stage and had my little Yashica camera that I got for my 17th birthday, and I photographed the Grateful Dead at the Oakland Auditorium Arena for the first time on the West Coast. And it was a magical experience, and I said, I want to keep doing this. The next photograph, and these are in no particular order except for that I just sent them to Jesse and he dropped them in the PowerPoint, so they're not chronological, unfortunately.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of jumping around. But this next photograph was taken just a few weeks earlier than that New Year's show on December 1st, 1979, which also happened to be my 18th birthday. Now, we took copious amounts of LSD because it was my 18th birthday, but I wanted to take pictures, and there was a balcony, and I brought my camera in, and I turned 18, and I took these photos of the Grateful Dead. And we drove 8 hours from New Jersey in my 69 Chevy Nova to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and these were legendary shows in a small little theater at a time when psychedelics and rock and roll and beautiful hippie chicks and groovy deadhead guys all converged and decided that we were going to go on the adventure of a lifetime, and that's what we did. The next photograph was taken exactly 28 years ago today, December 10th, 1992, if I'm doing my math correctly, 28 years ago.
Yeah.
And this was shot at an art gallery here in Berkeley, for an art exhibit that Jerry Garcia was doing of some of his new drawings. And I posted this on my Instagram and my Facebook page. Maybe now's a good time to say, if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's at Jay Blakesberg, and on Facebook, it's Jay Blakesberg Photography. And so this photograph, I just threw that in there because it's an anniversary photo of 12/10/92. The next photo goes to December 26, 79. This was also that first run in Oakland, the first time I came to California and saw the Grateful Dead. They played 5 nights. They played the 26th, the 27th, the 28th, the 30th, and the 31st. And I took photographs on 3 of the nights, the 26th, the 28th, and the 31st. And I dropped acid on the 27th and the 30th. But I made sure that I did a lot of LSD so that I'd be tripping basically for all 5 nights. Without actually taking LSD, if you take 5 hits of acid on the 30th, you're kind of still a little bit high on the 31st. So it's all good. And that's how we used to roll back then when we were 18 and we could do shit like that. Nowadays, we're old and in the way. And unfortunately, we can't because it takes like a month to recover from that kind of stuff. So those days are long gone. The next photo taken the same day, 12/26/79. And the next one after that is Garcia from 12/28/79. And this is just taken with my little 50 millimeter lens, and there was no photo pit, no barricade, and you're just leaning on the stage. You can just see I'm leaning on the stage. The next one again is a 12/28/79 shot, part of that 5-night run. I love this photograph. This is Bob Weir rocking it out, Phil Lesh dropping that bass bomb, and Billy and Mickey just, boom, man. This is just one of those shots that I love. And then the next one is the same night, 12/28/79. And there's Jerry and Bob playing a little slide guitar. Another one after this is 12/28/79 as well. Love this shot of Jerry, just young and healthy. And we all got the whole, everything about this is just joy. We just have the whole world in front of us. Another one from New Year's Eve is the next one, 12/31/79. And then one more from New Year's Eve. Again, this is the balloon drop at midnight, right before they were all landed at Garcia's feet, and the confetti, and they're playing Sugar Mag. And, from a kid from New Jersey who had never seen something like this, you're like, holy fucking shit, like, this is unbelievable. When can I move to California? Because this is like, the promised land. This is where we want to be. This is where the Grateful Dead is. And within a few years, I made that a reality. And that are my photographs of the Grateful Dead.
Oh, man.
I don't even know where to start as far as questions and stuff.
I'm letting you take the lead on this because he's the resident Deadhead. I do very much enjoy the Grateful Dead, but I feel like Court's head is swimming right now with so many feelings.
That's a lot of great photographs that really capture. They just really capture what I like about the band, which is, like you said, just kind of the joy that they.
Joy.
Yeah.
They don't look like they're taking themselves too seriously. That's what I like. It's a band that's playing. They're not necessarily just performing. They're playing. You know, it's so life. Like
It's
I don't know.
it's a magical experience, and when you know, when we're not living in a pandemic in the time of Rona 20, soon to be celebrating Rona 21. I take my slideshow. I have a Grateful Dead slideshow that's about 90 minutes long that I take on the road and narrate, you know, my photographs, photographing the Grateful Dead over a 40 plus year, 50 year experience now, if you're counting post Jerry Garcia, where I still photograph the members of the Grateful Dead in all their current incarnations. One of the most, you know, biggest one right now is Dead and Company with Bob Weir, the two drummers. But you know, Phil Leggio is doing a lot of stuff, and I continue to document that rock and roll Grateful Dead experience until the day that we all die.
Are there any?
It won't be anytime soon. I don't want to do that.
No, of course not.
I don't want to die from Rona 20 or Rona 21. I want to stay healthy, and I want to stay ready for the zeitgeist that's going to come back when this all ends and we get vaccinated and it all disappears and we can get back to like normal life, where we can go see concerts and be with our friends, and I can give like all these people that I barely know like awkwardly long hugs. You know,
Yes.
It'll be really weird, like so good to see you, even though I've only seen you once every 10 years for the last 10 years, but I'm going to give you an awkward hug because we can. So look out, people. All right, let's move on to Carlos Santana. I don't want to run out of time.
I actually don't know if we'll have time for that, in addition to maybe talking about the Dead a little bit, or like, it's up to you.
I'm all out of Dead questions, so.
Yeah. Okay. So what we have time to do, because we have about 10 minutes left of the entire show, so we could go through some Santana real quick, or we can kind of just have a general chat about your photography goings on, and you could plug some stuff if you feel like it.
We'll do some speed dating. Let's do Santana. Really
Sure.
quick.
I'm down for that. Let's do that.
Yeah.
All right, speed dating. Here we go, Jesse. This first shot, January 1996. This is the back cover of Supernatural, Carlos Santana's 50 million selling record. I got the back cover of that. The next shot is a portrait I did of Carlos in 2011. The next one is 1991 with John Lee Hooker. Carlos and John Lee did a song together. The next one is a portrait I did of Carlos in 99, right when Supernatural was coming out. That's for a magazine. This next one is Carlos in the studio in 2010 for Rolling Stone magazine. This next one is in 2011 when Carlos Santana went back and visited his old high school in the Mission District in San Francisco and played with a bunch of high school students. The next one is Carlos up at his house in 1991 for the cover of BAM magazine. The next one is from 1999. These were the publicity photos I did of Carlos for the Supernatural record. This next one is Carlos in 1988, and this ended up as a magazine cover and for the San Jose Mercury News Sunday supplement. And this last one is a cover of one of Carlos Santana's records where they cut all the crowd out and used him. All right, let's go to the next folder, the Rolling Stones, and we'll continue speed dating.
Sure.
I definitely want to see the Stones photos.
And then we'll get back to chatting about whatever you want to ask me, and let the world know that they can, Jesse, you looking for the Stones? And we can talk about, like, you can go to my website, www.rockoutbooks.com, and order some of my books as holiday gifts. We're still shipping every day. That's my website, rockoutbooks.com. This is Keith Richards, the man, the legend, in 99 here in the Bay Area. The next one is also from 99. The first one was in January of 99. This is April of 99. Mick, Keith, and Ronnie Wood. The next one is Mick Jagger from 1994. The next one is Mick Jagger from 1989. That's 31 years ago. This is unbelievable that I shot that. November 4th of 89 in Oakland. The next one is at the baseball stadium here in 2002, November 8th, 2002. The next one is the same show, November 8th, 2002. The next one is Keith Richards up at KFOG Radio, visiting the station up for a solo record in January of 93. The next one is a great shot of Mick from 94. Another one from the 2002 show at Pac Bell Park, which is now AT&T Park, which is some corporate thing. And the last one is Keith getting down and nasty and with that leopard print jacket on November 14th, 1997. All right, those are all my photos. What do you got for me, boys, before we got to wrap things up?
I have a pretty basic question, but I do really want to know it. Is there a standout favorite to you as far as your entire career, and I mean prior to the career, but just the time that you have been photographing, that's the word. Who's your standout, maybe favorite performer to photograph?
Well, I mean, there's different people. You know, I love photographing Neil Young. I love photographing Tom Waits. I love photographing the Grateful Dead. I love photographing Carlos. I mean, you know, I all of them for different reasons. You know, everybody's got their own little quirks and uniqueness about them, and you know who they are, what they do.
Well, maybe this is a possibly more interesting question. Who has been the most difficult performer to photograph?
I don't like to talk out of school.
Sure, I understand that, but in a more general sense.
Well, they're all difficult because they're musicians, right?
That's fair, yeah.
They all have
That is very fair.
They all have an enormous amount of ADD because they're so creative and their minds are racing a million miles an hour. And so is mine. So I try and keep up with them. But, you know, when an artist says you have 10 minutes to make a brilliant photograph of me and then you got to go, you know, that to me, that's difficult. But I get it. And I deal with it and I go with the flow. So, you know, there's been a couple of bands that have been particularly difficult and maybe even on the verging on horrible, but we won't mention.
Yeah, you don't need to.
You know, I think it actually speaks highly of you that there has been no one through your career that you had such a horrible experience with that you don't even mind burning a bridge. Like, no one is bridge burning worthy. Like, that there's still a bridge with even the bad ones. Yeah, I think that speaks highly of you.
You know, the other thing is that, you know, everybody's got their issues. Everybody's quirky. So, you know, like I said, you just got to go with the flow, and mean people suck, and, you know, you just kind of move on and do the next thing that you got to do.
Well, Court, final thoughts?
Thank you. Thanks for walking us. Yeah. Thank you for walking us through all these. That was a ton of great stories. And I'm probably going to listen back or watch back to this episode just so that I can hear the stories again. Cause we got through a lot.
Ton of information was laid on us. And I loved every second of it.
An hour flies by. I do on Twitch. I do every other week on a Sunday talk show with photographer called Photos with Stories, and we go 2 hours, and we can barely fit it all in. You know.
Sure. You get it.
You know, people are falling asleep on us. We're like, you know, because they're like, wait, this is still going on. But we just did our last show of the year last Sunday. It's called Photos with Stories. You can find it on YouTube. Fans.live. Subscribe to Fans.live, which will start going on Twitch in the new year. We have a couple of really great shows lined up already. The first one will be Sunday. I believe it's the 17th of January, that weekend. Fans.live. You go check that out and you can learn about it and you can watch my show, which is very interesting. If you want to buy a book from me, we're still shipping for the holidays. Rockoutbooks.com, ROCKOUTBOOKS.com. We have lots of cool books in there for all sorts of music fans. And there's a couple of really cool art books, even though Corey knows nothing about fine art photography.
And I never will.
And that's his loss.
Corey is only an expert in nude photography.
Yeah, that's his lost life. Yeah, you got to stop looking at all that porn photography and start looking at classy porn, which is which is not like people doing the dirty deed. It's just like, you know, beautiful.
They're hinting
thinking about it.
They're
just thinking about the deed.
And then it's art. You know? We're in a window where it's very dark and moody, right? But yes, there's a lot of brilliant photography out there that's very beautiful, very inspirational, made with a lot of passion. And that's what this world is fueled on, is inspiration and passion. So, Corey, if photography is not your passion and masturbation is your passion or whatever it might be, go and figure it out, and go out there and inspire you, and find your niche, and because with more inspiration and more passion, more good things will happen, right?
Absolutely. Jay, you have been a goddamn delight. Thank you so much for being on the show. I sincerely mean that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And all you at home, thank you for tuning in. This has been a very fun time for Court and I hope Jay as well. Join us next week. I don't know what we have lined up, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I got nothing.
We'll tell you all about it on our Instagram at Dad Rock Talk. We'll let you know when we know. How about that? Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.
Thank you one more time to Jay, Corey, and Court. That is 6 o'clock Dad Rock Talk. Come back in about, let's call it, an hour and 2 minutes for the Stab Show with, if you didn't get enough Corey here, you got a second serving coming up at 8. Corey Behringer, Eric Barger, Alyssa Cowan. Gonna be a fun episode of the Stab Show. In the meantime, where can we send you guys on Twitch? How about our friends at SpecScript? You know what? It looks like they're doing something. We haven't sent you over to SpecScript in a while. Go enjoy Sarah Kennedy and friends over at SpecScript. Give me 1 second. I'll send you guys over there, and I'll see you back here at the top of the next hour, 8 o'clock, for the Stab Show. 1 sec, and go enjoy SpecScript.